A really exciting announcement that I'm actually going to ask Dr. Clements to come on up to talk about how this came about, why it came about, and then I'll come up and talk about how we're going to put it into play. So Dr. Clements, would you mind coming up and telling the good folks in the room this exciting new project?
So I met Tom Clements when I was 19 years old, and that's been a while. And we were in college and sociology majors, a lucrative career that we both selected. And Tom sat on the second row and flirted with the girls around him. And sometime later, we kind of decided, we have some things in common. And we talked about starting a men's halfway house. And so I'm a middle-class kid from Columbia, Missouri, and he's from St. Louis, and we're sociology majors. And what I thought I knew about a men's halfway house, I don't know, but we were idealists, right? So we married. He moved from St. Louis to Columbia, and we lived our lives there. And in 2010, he got a call from Governor Hickenlooper and said, hey, would you be interested in coming to Colorado? And we found ourselves living in the state of Colorado, and he serving as the executive director of the Department of Corrections, and I became the Commissioner of Behavioral Health in Colorado. We spent our lives at the dinner table, as Rachel and Sarah would tell you, and in our day-to-day talking about this intersection of behavioral health in the field of corrections and criminal justice in general. And the conversations went something like, if you would do what you were supposed to do, then I would have to do what I do, and that'd just go way better. Because I'm a psychologist, what do I know about, fences and razor wire and, security and all of those things? But it turns out in the state psychiatric hospitals that I operated, there were a lot of men and women who had very, very serious mental health conditions and who also had very, very serious crimes. And so our lives continued to intersect over the years in the work that I did and the work that he did. Tom was an eternal optimist. And he really, really, really just could not find a point beyond which he would go in terms of investing in people and supporting in people and believing in particularly redemption and the ability to change. And we saw that in our own lives with family members. We saw that in the men and women that we served in both of our fields. So over the years, we've come and we've tried to represent as best we can Tom and his legacy. And inevitably, the media, when they talk about Tom, talk about his death. As recently as 48 hours ago in the town that I live in Colorado Springs. And so, Tony, when you were speaking about, it just keeps on giving, we on March the 19th will recognize 9 years since Tom showed up on our doorstep and since I last held him. And it's not okay with me. It's not okay with me that we talk about his death and we don't talk about his life and what he actually lived for. And when both recipients, when you talked about, you do this with your families, every one of you in here brings their children, their wife, their husband, their mother, their father to work with them. And those of us who stand behind and who pray and hope and wish and want that all goes well today are the ones who have to carry the message. And so last year, when I came to the award ceremony, I began to think about, more and more when I come to this ceremony, there are fewer and fewer faces that I know, right? And even though Tom and I worked alongside one another, and he spent nearly 40 years in corrections at some level, starting with working in St. Louis County Jail when he was a punk in college. And fewer and fewer faces that I recognize at the table here. And so I called and said, hey, let's have a different conversation. Can we talk about Tom's life? Can we talk about legacy and what the investment meant? And if none of you ever heard Tom's name again, that there would be something in his death, something in his assassination in my home that would go way beyond him and that would really bring a different message to the fore. So instead of in the Colorado Springs Gazette or the Denver Post, instead of reading of his death and the details of his death and the fact that 9 years later it's still a cold case, right? Files, they showed us the room, files of the details of his death. How can we talk about his life and what he really, really invested in? So he and I had some pretty spicy arguments. And one of the ones that we began to talk about was this balance between what do I do with men and women in state psychiatric hospitals who have committed very serious offenses, and what does he do with men and women in correctional facilities with very serious mental health problems, and sort of whose job is it, right? Well, it's obviously both of our jobs. But I was trying to change the culture at one of my state psychiatric hospitals and really trying to promote and push and induce a more trauma-informed response to the individuals that we served. So I got some money, right? I went to the legislature, begged, gave every piece of data that I could about why we had to structurally change the buildings that we served individuals in. And I had an opportunity to, invest some money in redoing a unit. And there is this lovely space, but then there's this big round desk with glass all the way around it. And so I began to talk about staff, why do we have this glass? What are we doing with this glass? And they're saying, well, these patients are, really dangerous and we need to protect ourselves. And so, well, how can you have a conversation with someone when you're like divided by this glass? And could we look at this differently and do something different? They were so opposed to it. And I'm sure they still talk about me tearing down their glass, but I kept after it because when I talked to patients, they wanted to have a conversation. They wanted to sit across from and look in the eyes of the individuals that were serving and supporting them. And so I began to talk. I was laughing with a couple of folks about my mantra of like, tear down this wall. Mine was tear down this glass, and let's think about how we can actually interact with the people that we serve. And similarly, Tom was investing in his work around reducing solitary and administrative segregation. And he was a man on a mission, and he had data. And I talked to some of his staff, still to this day, and they talk about how angry they were because he insisted that they pull every single file of every single individual in administrative segregation, and they look at it beginning to end and figure out why they were there and what was happening and what was the benefit. And it was work that was hard, and every day took us to conversations that were hard, but he kept slugging through. And I spoke before about moral courage. It was really the belief that I can do something, just me, in the midst of all of these, thousands of people, I can make a difference. And Tom really, really felt that he and his team could make a difference. So they, as Rick mentioned, they did make some serious progress. In September of 2012, Tom was an avid cyclist, for those of you who may not know, and he had a very, very serious cycling accident. He was 3 miles from the house, riding a road that he rode every day. I was sitting at home reading the newspaper, and I got a call from someone, and they said, "Don't worry, Tom's all right." Well, when they say don't worry, then what do? Like, you worry, right? And so it turns out that he was making a curve and hit gravel and had a very serious accident. He broke his clavicle, multiple ribs. He had 3 breaks in his pelvis, had, road rash like I've never seen and never wanted to have, and ended up in the hospital for 4 weeks. He couldn't walk. He was in, of course, severe pain and in the trauma unit. And following his discharge from hospital, he had several embolisms. It was very, very serious. I took him in. They said if you'd been, if you'd waited another hour, he'd be gone. It was very serious. So 4 weeks pass and he finally makes it home. He can't walk. His staff are coming to our house and holding staff meetings in the living room. And he begins over the course of, the next months to improve. He had been invited to participate in the Norway prison tour. And he said, how can I do this? I've got, I still got these serious clots. I shouldn't do this. So he sort of wavered. He was going to send some staff. But as time between the end of September, early October, and February, he continued to make some progress. And finally, his physician said, hey, if you're going to go, you're on blood thinners. So, I'm terrified that he's going to fly internationally with this kind of condition going on. But he went, and that trip changed his life. It rocked his world because he got to go and hear from and see other men and women in their physical spaces who were actually experiencing renewal and who were actually experiencing a different way of receiving treatment and correction. And it just ignited what he already had tried to promote within his own institutions, within probation and parole and institutions in Missouri. And just saw a much more humane interaction with individuals. He came back from that trip the end of February, and on March the 19th, he was assassinated. And in those weeks, every single day, we talked about possibilities and what would happen if we treated people in a different way. What would happen if we talked about the fact that they're going to live next to you, or they're going to be in the restaurant sitting beside you, that they're going to be back in community, and words that I've heard all of you speak of. And so when we talked about the recognition that occurs here, I am so grateful. And my family is so honored that you continue to remember Tom. But I wanted to think of something that goes much beyond Tom, because fewer and fewer of you will know Tom in these years to come. And what is something that we can do to infuse in the lives of the people that sit at this table that goes much beyond him? So we started talking about how to get more people into settings where they can dream and think and see possibilities. And is there a way that we can support them when they decide, when I go back, I'm going to do this thing? And how can we promote a different conversation? And so I think through the leadership at CLA, we have some ideas that really can go much beyond Tom's life, and much beyond anything that he said or did or thought, and much beyond really the lives of our family, and can really, really support you in the work that you do every day. And I hope that you'll find it as exciting as we have, because it is fun. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Clements. Thank you, Rachel. So pretty exciting stuff. Anytime you mix a very good idea with passion, and then mix in a little Clements, like, good things are going to happen. And so really for the past couple months, we've been working behind the scenes. First, it's got to be acknowledged that our board supports what I'm about to tell you what we're going to do. Under Ann's leadership and Scott Frakes and Quincy Booth as VP and our regional chairman. As you know, it's Dean Williams in the West, it's Carol Michi in the Northeast. Was Jeff Dunn, now it's Brian Sterling in the South, and it's Heidi Washington in the Midwest. Oh yeah, Brian Collier, sorry, did I say Brian Sterling? I got Brian Sterling on my mind. It's Brian Collier in the South, and John Osmond is our associate rep And say what? Oh, I think, did I mention Heidi already? Yeah, Heidi. Yeah, but let's do it again. Heidi Washington in the Midwest. Yeah, from a Midwest girl. So anyways, very supportive of this. And so what we're going to do is this. So we are calling this the Clements Project. And we've partnered with two organizations, one being the Center for Justice and Human Dignity. It's a new organization, and the other being Recidivist. And many of you know Recidivist. Both organizations are in the room, by the way. And so really what we've been doing is what looks like making sausages over the past couple months and getting our base under us. What does this want to look? What do we want this to look like? What do we want to get out of it? And what it's going to look like is we're going to be seeking some applications from members, probably to start off with 2 or 3 members that we're going to send you both to an international organization that's proven to do some of these innovative things that we're talking about, but also North American systems. We've got systems here today that are absolutely worthy of looking at. We don't have to go overseas all the time. We've got great leaders like Leanne Birch that was in North Dakota, that is a graduate of the same program that Dr. Clements talked about, that Tom went to, that's come back and done amazing things in North Dakota. We've got Scott Simples here, also a graduate of a program like this, Josh Tewalt, Rick Ramish. We've got some really, really great minds in the room that have been there, that have done this, that have seen it, felt it, smelled it, and it feels good. It's like a really good thing for each of you to take a look at. So we've developed the base for this, and we've developed the process of what we're going to do moving forward. And now, quite frankly, we're moving into the funding stage, and we want to be very sensitive about who funds it. So we don't have a big wide net out there where we're saying, hey, give us your money. We want to be very, very strategic about where funding comes from, for all the reasons that you can probably think of why we want to be strategic about that. So we're just about to launch into the funding stages of doing a project like this. Once that's secured, then you're going to see an application process that's going to come out, and it's going to say, hey, if you're interested in doing something like this, tell us why. Tell us where you're at in your system that might have a place for you to be able to affect some change back there. We're working closely with the ICPA, the International Corrections Prison Association. We met with Diane Williams, the North American chapter yesterday. We're already talking to countries like Singapore, Auckland, New Zealand, Australia, North Ireland. We've got a lot of systems out there that really that want to host us, and vice versa. So we really want to open up an exchange back and forth, where, just like Dr. Clements mentioned, let's get out there and put eyes on a different system. And I know I'm a recipient of it too. I was, I went and spent, I've been twice now with Leanne back to Norway, and just like Tom came back completely converted. Now listen, we know that there's systems out there that will never be like Norway. So we know that. And so we're being very mindful of wanting to go to some of these systems that look like American prisons, that look like that were built in the early 1900s. But when you walk in there, they've done some things where it smells like freaking Starbucks coffee, and there's paint on the walls, and there's art everywhere. And the vibe between staff and those that are incarcerated, it's just different. It's a different feel. It's a different look. But you have to see it. You kind of have to go see it for yourself to really go, man, like that clicks. Because if you just read about it, it's just not enough. You actually have to go see it. And that's where I think the goal of our board is let's get some of our members out there, take a look at some of these things and see what happens. Madam President.
Yeah, and the exciting part of this is that it's really a 2-part project. The first part is sending directors and some members of their team to go see it. The second part is getting technical support to begin to implement something, so that it's not just a trip, but there's accountability for what you saw, and then what are you going to implement, so that you're actually doing what you've seen. And that's where we're going to get the lasting, that's where Tom is going to begin to infiltrate across the country, because we will go see something, and it doesn't have to be all, but there's a part of what you see that now becomes your legacy in your state. And it's because of what Tom and his ability that we're able to afford to all of us. It was so exciting when Lisa said, I want to do more about Tom's life. And as you can tell, you don't have to have known Tom directly to feel what he has done for this industry. And I just could not be more proud to have been a part of these discussions and to really put this in motion. And so we're very appreciative of the organizations that want to help fund this. Kevin's leadership, Dean's leadership on these discussions have just been really exciting. So to be able to make it happen and then help us implement is really what's going to give us value for this legacy. So I'm just super excited, and I'm so proud of you and Lisa, Rachel, for having been here and to be able to talk about it.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I think one of the things that you can expect is to see Dr. Clements and Rachel's hands all over this thing, right? I mean, they want to be involved. They want to be a significant part of this thing, which is awesome. So, but anyways, that's what they call in the business a teaser, and so we're throwing that out there to you just to know more is coming, right? There's a lot going on behind the scenes, but you're going to see more. You're going to hear more about this. But we wanted you to get excited about it. I mentioned those names for a reason, and there's more in the room that have been there, that are graduates of these things. But it's going to be really, really exciting. There's a lot to come about this Clements project, and we're excited about it. So again, can't be stated enough. Thank you, Dr. Clements. Thank you, Rachel, for your leadership in this area. It's going to be awesome.